It is so nice to see Erling Haaland break the goal scoring record in the Premier League because it just silences all of the critics that he had. If you don't believe me, just go look at some of the stuff that people were saying before he even joined Manchester City, and then go and look at the opinions of people after the very first game of the season, which was a Community Shield game between Manchester City and Liverpool. In that game, Erling Haaland missed an open net, and Darwin Núñez played pretty well. And immediately you had people criticizing Haaland, saying that, well, the Premier League is going to be a lot harder for him to adapt than the Bundesliga. That Darwin Núñez was going to be a better signing for Liverpool than Haaland was for City. And Haaland had just silenced all of those critics. And in fact, he's gone above and beyond what anybody could have anticipated. Because I think most people knew that he would be good. He's an elite striker. He scored at every single team he's been on. He scored in the Norwegian League. He scored in the Bundesliga. He scored in the League. He scored in the Champions League. In terms of scoring goals, there is almost nobody. In fact, right now, there is nobody better than Erling Haaland. But coming into the season, you could tell that he had everything that you needed from a striker. He's very fast. He's incredibly strong. His positioning is elite. What might look like tap-ins is actually him being in an incredibly good position, anticipating where to go for the ball, and being exactly where he needs to be. That is one of the most important traits for a striker because it makes scoring goals look simple. And that's what he does well. On top of that, after profiling him, just the fact that he's joining Manchester City, a team that has already dominated the Premier League for the last 5 seasons, a team that has an unbelievable number of creators, the best manager in the world, and more importantly, missing that sole ingredient. They have won 4 league titles in 5 years without a proper number 9. It was just a match made in heaven. There was always going to be concerns of how quickly would Haaland adapt to City's system because as we've seen with Manchester City, it always takes 2 seasons for people to fully adapt. You saw it with Leroy Sané, you saw it with Jack Grealish. Pep plays such an advanced system that it does take time for players to gel and be comfortable with the environment. So most people probably would have guessed that Haaland was going to score maybe 20, 25 goals, but he's immediately had an impact, and that's just because it took Pep a little quicker than normal to understand how to utilize him, where to put the ball, because they can afford to be much more direct when you have a player of his quality. I mean, you can just put the ball into different channels. You can almost hoof it at times because Haaland has so much pace, because he has so much power, he's going to get onto the end of it. And for guys like Kevin De Bruyne, Grealish, Mahrez, Gundogan, who aren't used to having a player like that, it's such a luxury in order to be able to pass the ball or cross it in and know that he's going to create something out of that opportunity. If City are finally able to win the treble, then Haaland was a huge factor in it. I think in terms of domestically in the league, they could have continued to achieve success. I think having Haaland sometimes allowed them to win games that they would have won maybe 1-0, 2-0 by bigger margins. But I think where Haaland is really going to shine and they're going to see his impact is in the Champions League. Could they finally get over the hump and win it? It would be because of Haaland's quality. Also, it helps that they also have Julian Alvarez on the bench. But I think the real difference between this team and the team that got all the way to the final in 2021 is that they have someone of Haaland's quality up top to be able to create certain half chances into goals. That is really what's going to elevate their team, to have an elite number 9, because we saw in the Champions League this season, teams that don't have a good striker struggle. We saw that with Bayern because Choupo-Moting isn't an elite level striker. We saw that with Napoli struggling heavily without Victor Osimhen. You need a good striker, especially in European competitions. I think domestically in the league, you have so many chances with 38 games that Pep could find clever ways and creative ways to get past it. I mean, as I said earlier, they won 4 league titles without a proper out-and-out number 9. But in the Champions League, when you don't really have that many opportunities and the margins are less, it really helps to have a clinical number 9 up front. The interesting point for me was that both Haaland and Salah, who had the previous record, got this new record in their very first season in the Premier League. Salah scored the 32 goals his first season at Liverpool after returning from the Serie A, and now Haaland does the same thing. And it's just funny to see because there's so many Premier League fanboys that just automatically assume that the Premier is the hardest league in the world and it's this impossible league, but all the time you're seeing people come into the league and dominate. Salah's done it, Haaland's done it, other players will continue to do it. There's players that come from the Bundesliga and flop, sure, but that's not the reason they flop. There's a wide range of factors that go into a player not performing well. If a player is quality, usually it doesn't matter what league is in. They'll perform. And you're seeing that with Erling Haaland, who's able to translate his goal-scoring ability to an even higher level now that he's in the Premier League. You could argue that the Premier League has become a farmers league because Haaland is scoring way more goals for City than he was ever scoring for Dortmund. And now City is most likely going to win their 5th title in 6 years. How is that any different from what Bayern Munich's been doing in the Bundesliga? Sure, the match days have been a bit closer. Some of City's titles have come down to the last day. But at the end of the day, they're dominating the league. It really has been a one-horse race, maybe 2 at the best of times. I'm even more excited to see what Haaland can achieve next season after 1 full season with Pep and the whole team. Pep having a season to look at his weaknesses, look at his strengths, see what he can do to improve the team. Because Haaland can have even more goals if he wasn't constantly subbed out in the 60th minute. But obviously Pep understands the long game. Keeping him fit and healthy for the important chunk of the season is way more beneficial to the team as a whole than having him stay in games and stat pad, when the reality is City are after one thing and one thing only: the treble, and more importantly, the UEFA Champions League.